Okay, firstly, thanks ever so much, both of you. So we're going to kick off with a couple of introductions. So Marc, perhaps you could start us off telling us your role at J&J, just by way of introduction.
Sure. So Marc Bengio, I'm part of the Johnson & Johnson technology team and head of technology supporting enterprise procurement. I've been at J&J for 20 years in many different functions in IT, and certainly really enjoying procurement these days.
Outstanding. Laurens.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Laurens Van Den Bovenkamp. I've been also 20 years with Johnson & Johnson in roles specifically in planning and then into procurement, and the last couple of years in strategy. And I was fortunate to live and work in 3 different continents for the company.
Outstanding. Great stuff. Okay, so as I say, we're going to try and cover as many aspects as possible as the project, but I think it'd be really good to start us off, and I'm going to ask this one to Laurens first. If you could give the audience a quick overview, perhaps let's just start with J&J. I mean, everyone's heard of J&J, but maybe let's just frame it a little bit by talking about Johnson & Johnson and the specific division that you guys work in.
Yeah, quick one on J&J. That's challenging. But we have one slide. Maybe you can move it. Yeah, this is one forward. Here we go. So Johnson & Johnson, so we pride ourselves since 1886, long history, where we are helping to reform and to shape the healthcare in the world. And we, if you think about Johnson & Johnson, we currently consist out of 2 major segments. One that you probably know of is pharmaceuticals, and then the other one that Marc and I work in. And this project that we're about to share with you as well is in medical technology, or medtech. And so medtech is about 1/3 of our overall revenue in the organization. And you see a few examples here on the slide in which areas we play in. You see on top some of our endo cutters or staplers, basically to open up your tissue during a surgery. So that's part of our surgery business. You see some sutures on the slide. And then also we play in orthopedics. So you see there a knee implant. And then a very different type of business is our vision care, so for contact lenses, and you may be familiar with that brand. And then more recently, for the last decade, we're playing a major role into robotic surgery as well.
Amazing
I
stuff.
think I forgot one picture on cardiovascular, but we also play a large role in the cardiovascular business.
Great stuff, important stuff as well. Okie doke. So next question, I'm going to start with you, Laurens, then Marc, I'll come to you secondarily. I think it'd be really good so if we set the scene at a J&J level, let's kind of take the next level down to think about the project. So it'd be great to hear what were the business challenges the company was trying to solve, which departments and roles were sort of most vocal, and was it part of a broader initiative to just set us the scene for the Porter project?
Yeah, for sure. And by all means, we're not claiming to be the experts in this area. For today, we really want to share our journey. Where did we start? And I don't want to take over your role here, Anthony, but basically what we want to share is 3 main segments of storytelling. One is why. Why did J&J adopt this platform for process orchestration? The other part is more where Marc will lead into, is around how does it fit into our digital stack. And the third part is more around the value case that we developed. So maybe by show of hands for those 3 topics, and you have multiple votes. But on the first one, on why did we start? How much interest in there? I see about 70 people in the room. Okay. And then more on the technology side. Okay, it's pretty even. And then on the business case. That's a little bit more. Okay, so a little bit more focus on the business case, the others are pretty evenly spread. So yes, it wasn't part of a specific strategy that we set on why we started on this journey, but if we go back about 6 or 7 years in J&J, we see a little more and more externalization of our supply chain. And that could be either picking up a production line and move it to an external supplier, to a vendor, or from the get-go, from a design, we already reach out to a supplier base and to manufacture the products for us from the beginning of the design process. And so we saw that more and more happening. However, we didn't have an overarching digital strategy to support the collaboration of those processes with those external vendors. as we all know, when you work in your internal company and you have your own manufacturing line, you have your own quality system and quality organization, lifecycle management, etc., and you have the person sitting next to you to manage your supply chain, it's much easier than when it goes over to an external vendor. So while we were doing that externalization, we also noticed that it was just more and more complex to manage those processes with external vendors, especially at the scale that we did it in J&J. So when then, I think it's about 2 years ago now, me and my boss, we were sitting in the company restaurant, we were sitting together, it's like, hey, we're doing all this externalization, but how do we now work on make it more efficient and digitizing those processes? So he actually gave me a one-pager, and I showed that one-pager many times to Marc as my technology partner. But initially he said, this was work for about 3-4 months and really mapping out all the processes that we do, and we call them jobs to be done, what you do when you work with a supplier as a customer. And he said, Laurens, good luck, and try to digitize that. I said, okay, let me just go into that world. I was not familiar with that world at all. And so getting deep into the organization, it's a large organization, so it took a few months to really understand what was happening in each of the spaces on digitizing those processes. And while doing so, we did a voice of the supplier on how it is to digitally collaborate with J&J, and we did a voice of our own employees, how it is to digitally collaborate with our suppliers. And the feedback was pretty raw in terms of, from a supplier perspective, and we'll come to that when we get to the solution, is when we work with J&J, we have numerous login credentials to work with you, more than 10, and it's not very clear who to contact for what. And also, if you think from an employee perspective, combined with the supplier, a lot of data and documentation was going through the good old-fashioned Microsoft Outlook, right? So it's in people's emails, in their inboxes. So it was said already a couple of times here today that one source of truth we didn't have. And with that, you don't have the right accountability from the supplier, but also from J&J to the supplier to manage your processes. And it just takes a long time to complete simple tasks. So that was on the why.
Wow, amazing stuff. So the two things I always take away from hearing the story is the jobs to be done idea, which is really just thinking about our relationship with the supplier across multiple areas, and also the really holistic nature of the approach that J&J took, which I think is amazing. So Marc, from your perspective as the IT business partner to Laurens, were you just reactive and terrified at the stuff he was throwing at you, or were there some...
Well, he was terrified when I showed him this.
There you go.
Yes,
those are the jobs
that's
to be
a
done.
terrifying slide.
Yeah, those are all the jobs to be done. Goodness.
So, yeah, it was about 40 plus jobs to be done that we identified, and that's when I came to Marc. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So on your side, Marc, were there additional requirements that as the business partner you were bringing to the project, or was it kind of more of a reactive list that you had to respond to?
I think it's a bit of both. First of all, you get a little bit shocked in how much has to be done. And I think the complexity of this project is really, we're not only touching 4 business units within the MedTech, but also different functions within each one of those. And a lot of them have different processes and different ways of doing some of the things that you see on this slide. So it's really what Laurens and the team brought is, okay, we have a vision on how we want to do this. The processes were looked at, and then we partner with each one of those functions to be able to get that. And to me, as we developed in technology our product stacks, we want to make sure that there's processes attached to it, and very importantly, value. It's important that from the get-go, we define what is the value and the ultimate goal that we want to do and sort of backtrack it through the process. And I think those are the requirements we gave from an IT perspective. One of the things we pride ourselves in the way our teams are constructed is that we create teams that are well-versed on the subject of the business that they're trying to do. And making sure that not only technology, as we've heard throughout the day today, is not the problem. I think it's important that we know where the business processes are, where the value we're trying to drive, where the objectives and key metrics that we want to measure.
Okay, makes sense. So I think that leads very nicely into the next area, which is we're going to sort of break it down a little bit. So we want to start with sort of roles and responsibilities. And when I spoke to Laurens a few months ago now, it really did strike me that the sort of partnership that exists between the business side and the IT. So I'll sort of start with you on this one, Marc, and is that how you see it? Is it a genuine partnership between the two of you? And is that standard for J&J? Is it always plain sailing and you guys just work beautifully together and away you go?
It is standard. I mean, it's for the last 2 or 3 years we've been implementing what we call HPT model, and not only in IT, all throughout J&J, high-performance teams, where when we have to tackle a business problems, we create a squad, and that squad really has different roles within them. So you have the project lead, you have the business process owner, the technology owners, data engineers, and all that coming from different teams, but then they become one team to be able to solve and drive the value that we're trying to do from a product perspective. So those are the elements, and that true partnership has transpired throughout the project so far and continuing.
Excellent. So now the killer question, do you agree, Laurens? Is that your
100%.
perspective too? Excellent.
Yeah, so this was also my first time leading a technology project from the business side, so I wouldn't have comparison, but you see indeed around J&J, this is the standard model that we have. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so Marc, we're going to come to you. We're going to shift now into a slightly different area, which is solution selection. We're going to think about how we do it. So before we, not so interested in really talking about specific vendors, but it's, you have such a broad set of requirements for this project. I'm really interested to understand how you think about potential solution types, how you evaluated these, and in the end, how you ended up choosing this type of solution, a supplier orchestration platform.
I think it's, again, sitting down with our business partners and really starting mapping out how does all the whole processes work. So each one of the jobs, I wouldn't say that we tackled all the 40 at once, and we're working in a very agile way. So we tackle a few at a time and we deliver on them and so on and so forth. But to be able to choose where we want to go from a solutioning perspective, RFI, RFPs, we work with different solutions, created POCs as well, to make sure that we know where we're getting that feedback, again, constant feedback from the user community to be able to create and drive that. It is important, that element of POC. Also looking, J&J, as you know, is so vast. There are many solutions out there. So supplier collaboration happens in many different ways at Johnson & Johnson. And so we looked at what has been done also in the past. But we had a set of certain requirements. One of them is how does it fit within our architectures? How does it fit within our other business processes? And looking a little bit further, not only from a medtech perspective, but also looking at the rest of the business. So.
Okay. And you mentioned RFIs and RFPs a moment there. Perhaps you could just share, to what extent was this a formal selection process? What were the sort of stages you went through in identifying a vendor?
So we went through, different questionnaires, and yes, there's many questions and sometimes difficult to go through them. But there are the criterias that not only are from a business perspective, but also from a technology perspective. So the RFP or RFI will contain, business process-driven questions, but also how to solution them from an IT or technology perspective, a digital. So going through that, and we went through, I think we went through a selection of 2 or 3, downgraded to 1 or 2, and then that's how we made our decisions.
Okay. And Laurens, on the business side, was that something you were very actively involved in, or were you kind of looking to Marc to lead here? Yeah,
from a technology decision perspective, it's Marc that was leading that, but obviously he's dependent on the business requirements to make such a decision. So we're very clear on what the business requirements are at an MVP level, minimum viable product, but then also what is the end state as an input to that process.
Okay. And then, and this is going slightly off script, but beyond your 2 functions, how broad was the stakeholder group sort of in making the decisions? Were you representing everybody else, or did you have a huge
big tent
of people? Yeah. Just the short.
That's So the pre-work to even get to this stage was mostly in my hands within J&J, and then within the medtech sector. If you think about all the business units that we have, and then the different functional stakeholders, you have to basically, as we say, walk the square within the company and then get that buy-in from those organizations, getting also the input on the business requirements, but that was that central point to collect that and provide it to Marc. I don't want to bother him with connecting to all those people.
Okay. And this is harsh because we haven't prepared this one, but any tips on sort of getting that sort of stakeholder buy-in either to the requirements or in the selection phase?
The stakeholder buy-in mostly, and we get there probably when we talk about the value case.
Yeah.
Because why are we doing this? Yeah.
Okay, no, fair enough. You've corrected me there.
But I would like to, I think also the business partners that Laurens is referring to really were involved. So, when we create the team and who's going to be able to be sponsoring this, we want to make sure that the sponsors are not just at a very high level, but they are there. And we keep on giving them updates every month and so on. And those stakeholders are at the IT level, at the business level, and the different functions as well. So it's getting their buy-in is really important. If not, off the bat, we're just catching up.
Yeah, especially over such a wide range of processes, and presumably a lot of people's jobs are going to change somewhat. So buy-in is essential. Okay. So this one's going to be for you, Marc. So we've touched on a number of themes, which is good. But I think maybe to come back to some perspective, we talked about the business perspective and challenges. Could you share a little bit about the J&J tech landscape into which this project was inserted, dropped, dumped, whatever the right adjective is?
Well, like many of our peers here, and we are ERP driven for our transactional systems and so on. In procurement, we're best of breed and looking at what are the different aspects that we need to solve for. So J&J, we have systems all over, financial systems and you name it, sourcing and procurement, and our P2P systems, Ariba, iCertis for contracting. I mean, you name it, a slew of different solutions. But the most important is, as we choose a new one, is how does it fit within our architecture? How do we look at it from an orchestration perspective in terms of driving data across those systems? And as Eloise was mentioning today, is that orchestration and also the intelligence, but an intelligent orchestration. And that's what we're actually aspiring towards and creating that type of architecture for the future.
Okay, great. And you alluded to this, but it'd be great to hear a little bit more because about policy, Marc, within J&J. Are there any sort of strategies or policies around how you select technology? So you referred to suites, you referred to best of breed. Are you sort of suite first, and then if they can't do it, best of breed is fine? Are you very specifically best of breed first? How do you kind of think about that sort of those questions?
I think through the thinking process, we just debate it and look at what's best for. So again, it's not about solving for today, but it's also looking at tomorrow, not the day after tomorrow, but just tomorrow. So I think it's important to really drive that concept. At the end of the day, it's not about the technology. The technology is, I think, secondary. The importance is how are we going to bring value? How is this going to drive our J&J further? And how are we, again, I'd be remiss if I don't mention the credo for J&J and why we do this for, right? We do this for our patients, the nurses, the doctors, the parents, and so on, as you can read in our credo. That's what drives us every day, and that's how we choose and we look for it.
Okay, that's a terrific guiding light, obviously. Okay, and Marc, I'm going to stay with you for a fraction longer on this sort of policy approach, because I know from the work we're doing that some of the capabilities are more, say, off the shelf, and some of them are more sort of configured or co-developed. So is there a standard approach to thinking about internal development versus co-development? Are you actively looking for off-the-shelf technology, or are you thinking, what, this is so bespoke to J&J, we know we're going to have to be building here? Is there sort of a thinking around that?
There is. I think, again, depends on the use case, but very much is, of course, we want things off the shelf that work pretty much in our right away, but that's not the reality of things. So how do we get to the next best thing from, off the shelf, configurable, low code or no code? I think those are some of the criterias that go in our thinking and how we drive those solutions.
Okay, so development goes on within J&J. So the platform involves people within J&J actually developing capabilities on the platform.
We have for many different platforms, yeah.
Yeah, okay, all right. So, Laurens, we've talked a little bit about technology. We're going to shift back more to the business area, and you mentioned this earlier, and I'll be honest, this was my favorite part of the conversation when we spoke before. I'd really love to understand in as much detail as you're willing to share the business rationale for embarking on the project. So I'll start there with that high level, and then maybe we'll dig a little bit deeper. What was the business driver here for
Yeah.
for digitizing.
And maybe I'll share a little bit this journey on that as well, because it was my own learning in a large project like this. When we started, like, it's obvious, right? You digitize your processes better. And that's how the first couple of months I had my conversations with the individuals. But then you start to really think about, okay, what's the true value that can come out of digitizing and also orchestrating, and you saw that separate slide with all those processes, orchestrating that through one platform. Doesn't mean that one platform is a solution for all the processes, but you orchestrate it. And actually within J&J, the project name is called Porta. And Porta is Greek for door. So you create that one door for your suppliers to collaborate with you, but then it could go to other solutions for in-depth than digitizing those processes. Throughout the journey, we also said we cannot only look inside in J&J, we need to reach out to peer companies, and we are linked to Gartner research, so we always start there, but then we went wider, and we talked to many companies that had solutions at maybe an infant stage, maybe a very mature stage, but what we typically found in the healthcare industry, there wasn't much out there in terms of supplier collaboration, digital capabilities. It was more in the automotive and fast-mover consumer goods. There we see more advanced supplier collaboration technologies. So we learned a lot from that. But also I asked them the question, how did you get your project approved? And in many cases, they say, well, it's obvious, strategic investment. And that's where it ended. So I didn't get a lot of input there, but then we went deeper and deeper within J&J. And obviously, when I then presented the business case to our leadership to get the funding cleared, my first comment was, yeah, it's a strategic investment. We're in the 21st century. We are managing tens of thousands of suppliers. How could we manage them through Outlook? Right? So that should already land, but that doesn't land. I think, Kostas, was your questions before as well. What's the value you create? So beyond the strategic investment, we have basically three main value drivers that come out of it. One is operational efficiency. So we did a lot of time studies on those jobs to be done that you saw on the slide. So how long does it take to do a typical process? Let me take one example. If you want to send out a questionnaire, could be on sustainability as the topic of today, to your supplier base. And you only wanted to send it to your supplier base that's based in a certain geography, certain country, and only supports a certain business, because that's where you want to get the data from. That took months and months to find or to set up your distribution list, the right email contacts from those suppliers that may have changed, and you go back and forth. And once you have that, you reach out and you don't get an answer, and you follow up and you follow up. So all that time we accumulated, and we did an average on that, and then all the other processes as well. And then we said, okay, imagine you have a platform where the master data is all in there based on geography, based on segmentation. And so we had operational efficiency. And then you can choose as a company, you say, okay, we could have then a headcount reduction. We didn't choose for that in J&J. It would be, okay, now we can spend more time on value-added activities versus all this administrative work. So that was one. The second one is around reliability. As we are, as Marc said, from our Credo perspective, our number one goal is to service our customers, that our products are in the hands of the practitioners in the hospitals and service centers. And if you think about reliability and then being dependent on your suppliers in your supply chain, we have some numbers out there that supplier cost disruptions. So we had our data on that, and then thinking about if you would now have earlier indication of a supply disruption at your supplier, and that you're not depending on an email from the supplier to send to you, maybe to someone that's on vacation or out of office. So we make some assumptions there that you could reduce that lead time that comes from your suppliers to notify you of a disruption, and managing supply disruptions more in an effective way. And then the last one, but definitely not least, and that's actually the one that made the business case, is around inventory optimization. So if you think about how inventory is determined, if you think about the calculation itself, one component of that is lead time variability. And that's where we got some benchmark data from once we were a few months further in the project, and we reached out back to Gartner, and they quoted about 40 to 50%, not of inventory reduction, but of your lead time variability reduction, leading then to inventory optimization. And so with the specific use cases that we had in the businesses, Some businesses more than in others, where we rely more on suppliers than on others. So we went quite deep in the organization, getting the buy-in from our business stakeholders on then the calculation, and we took an assumption then on inventory optimization. And that actually financially made our business case.
I mean, just as a quick segue, I love this so much. I think we spend a lot of time talking to prospects and potential customers about business case development. And when Laurens explained that supplier collaboration directly impacts inventory, or supplier collaboration directly impacts how we as a business serve our customers, to me, it's by a mile the most compelling use of this technology, which I absolutely love. So really exciting, and thanks for sharing. I'd love to hear the numbers, but I know that's not a fair question. Alrighty, so I'm going to move on a little bit now, and I'll come to Laurens again with this one as well. But we are at an event around supplier experience, so let's talk about experience, but maybe let's start with internal staff. So just this is kind of the last area before we'll open it up to questions. I kind of know a little bit about this because we talk a little bit more often, but how important is the internal user experience of the tool? And is there anything in particular you're doing to try and drive adoption by your internal staff?
Yeah, so if you think about who is using this platform within J&J, those are obviously the supplier-facing users. And you can think about planning, and that's mostly probably the most interactions with our suppliers compared to other things. You can think about quality, lifecycle management, and engineering. And so with that user base in mind, we also designed the platform. I designed the business requirements already a year before we even went live. So we already brought them in. It's like, what kind of experience also do you want to have in the platform? But I was listening to Eloise earlier today around the different generations that are in your organization, and definitely we have Gen Z coming into Johnson & Johnson as well. So for me, it was also about setting expectations. Right? What can a business-to-business platform really do versus the technology that they have day to day in their hands? So really involving them in that process was key. Now that we launched the platform, and it's been about 10 months now, and we're still expanding the capabilities within the platform and expanding it to more and more suppliers. With that adoption, that's actually going through the roof. With that going through the roof, you also get a lot of feedback. And with that feedback, we translate that now into what kind of enhancements do we need to do. But we continuously, and we have a super user network that we tap into to get that feedback from them as part of usability studies. So critical for us.
Excellent. And Marc, same question to you, I guess, from your sort of experience in IT. Adoption by staff of new tools is, one of the key issues.
Yes, for sure. And because of so many tools that we use on a day-to-day basis, right? From the get-go, as I mentioned in our high-performing teams, we have XD part of it. Experience design is part of the team from the beginning to be able to make sure that we capture those needs that the user has, both at internal and, of course, external. And also because it's such a persona-driven type of solutions, we want to make sure that we cater to the right place. And this tool is going to evolve over time, and we need to constantly relook at that usability, get the feedback, and drive that product. So
and it is
very important.
It is a very structured approach to feedback, isn't it? You're very regularly surveying, you're very regularly going back to users.
Yeah, to the point that we want to also build in within the tool. So in some of our tools already, surveys are built in within the transaction, or we're at the end of the transaction, to make sure we get constant feedback of the user.
Excellent. Okay, so we've talked about, Marc, I'll come to you with this one. We've talked about internal user experience, and of course we have to, given the event title, talk about supplier experience. So, to what extent was the supplier experience considered here? When you were conceiving and developing the project, or you can take it.
Yeah, no, we chose basically because initially, back 2 years ago, when we did our initial voice of the supplier, our VOS, we got that feedback that I was talking about. Well, it came from a specific segment of suppliers, so we reached out to them again, and for the design, but now also that we're live. So we have a subset that we continue to reach out to. Actually, this week, we're doing another usability study, not only with them, but we expanded that supplier base because we're growing the platform and getting that feedback from them. So it's key for us that the supplier is part of the solution with us as well. Doesn't mean that we can do everything that they ask for, but really want to listen well. Okay, what are the key problems that they have that we want to solve for them to the extent that we can.
Okay, and are you using any adoption? I know we didn't prepare this, but are you using any adoption metrics by suppliers?
Yes, so basically we're using the HEART model, that's from Google, and but for now we're using mostly the adoption to see the transactions, but now we're also moving that more to happiness and engagement, and to understand, okay, how happy are they when they do a transaction.
Excellent. And again, another slightly off-topic question, I'll chance it. You talked about the business case. To what extent do you have a sort of a feedback loop to go back and see how well you're delivering against those metrics?
Oh yeah, I'm on the hook for that, yes. Yeah. And so we did give ourselves some time. So we deployed the platform about 10 months ago. We're expanding the platform in terms of capabilities, but then also the suppliers. We're currently about 80% of our spend is live on the platform. So now you have that critical mass. And then also from an internal perspective, you want to have more and more users, functions that adopt to the platform. So we're on the hook for 2025 for delivering now the savings on the projects as part of the value case that I just outlined. So yes, that's when you get then into the monthly and the quarterly reviews, depending on the senior leadership, on proving that the platform is actually delivering the value that we committed to.
Okay, and so if next year you're not here, we'll know why.
Then you know why.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay, so I'm about to open it up for questions, but I just wanted to do a sort of classic wrap-up for each of you, and maybe Marc, I'll start with you first, is what would you say your top 2 or 3 learnings, or one, if there's just one standout learnings from this project would be?
Okay, so one of the things is, as you choose the solution, even if it's an out-of-the-box solution, I think it's very important to write down requirements and align those requirements against all the stakeholders. Because very often we could say, okay, it's out of the box, but it's not doing that. So it's making sure that everybody understands if this is A, then this is what you understand to be A, and we're okay, and we're driving that through. I think those are key learnings that we learned. Really driving a very agile methodology, and that's what has helped us a lot. Believe it or not, but since we started, 10 months ago, we have had 10 releases of the product. So every month we deliver something new to the user and really track how they're progressing and so on. So I think that has helped us really drive that adoption in a very nice, steady way.
Okay. Laurens, from your perspective?
Yeah, I think twofold. Probably key learning, I think we did that well, is the stakeholder management. Really set the expectations well. What value you're planning to deliver, and that you actually can deliver that. So we were coming back to the benchmarking. We were on the conservative side on that, and then also one of the design principles as part of the program. One was perfection is the enemy of the good, and then we got full blessing from our senior leadership. Just go deliver something. It's better than email, all right? While doing so, you also need to really well set the expectations to your users. What the platform can deliver for them, how it's going to change their day-to-day job, and be very clear on, okay, you have this now. I know it's not where you want it to be. It's a minimum viable product, but then share with them, set those expectations on the roadmap on where they're going to be, and then just not lose them in that engagement metric.
Okay. All right, so I have 2 quick questions. I'll ask both now, and I'll allow you each to choose who's going to answer it. So one is there anything you do differently? And then the secondly, and this will be the last question before I open up, is what's next for this project? So I don't mind who takes which.
Yeah, so what's next for the project, business-wise, is just expanding the capabilities. And that's for the coming year. So now we have our set user base. Again, coming back to the expectations there. Can we do this with the platform? Can we do that with the platform? So that's what's next for the project, expanding it so we can get more adoption. And with that more adoption, that's useful. You basically create the value. And then expand it to, I wouldn't say we're going to go to 100% of our spend, because there's a long tail of mom and pop shops that we do business with. But yeah, still significantly increasing the amount of suppliers that are connected to the platform.
Okay.
Yeah.
That means we might have to finish on the negative. Is there anything you do differently?
Well, I'll add a little bit on what's next as well. So from a technology perspective, we support, as Laurens mentioned at the beginning, we have our innovative medicines, our pharmaceuticals, and we have medtech, for which the project. From a technology, we support the whole organization. So we want to also make sure that whatever we're developing and we're building on will also be able to serve other groups, like innovative medicine.
Are they looking over and with envy at what you guys are doing?
They're looking at us, they're looking at Laurens and how, from a business perspective, what the business case is all about. And I think that's important to drive that and create solutions that are, open in terms of how can we expand it beyond the one.
Excellent. Okay, excellent stuff. I loved it. So we certainly have a few minutes and something to throw at you. Any questions from the floor? Oh, there we go. That's one. You ready?
All right. Hello. Yeah. So first of all, thank you very much for sharing your experience. I'm here representing Nestle, and we are pretty much where you guys were 2 or 3 years ago, right? So I have 2 questions, and you already asked the question, but I would like to kind of go a little bit deeper. If you had the opportunity to go back 2 to 3 years, is there anything that you will kind of do differently? And my second question is, you mentioned, Laurens, that you are on track on delivering the benefits, the business benefits that you set yourself as a goal, but 10 months into this, is there any kind of surprises, both positive or negative, that you were not anticipating that this whole process will bring?
Very good question. Yeah. So if you are where we were 2 years ago, you were sitting with your boss in the cafeteria and getting that one pager. Yeah. What I would do differently, I always look at speed and efficiency. And if I think about the time it took me to rally around the organization, our stakeholders, and not really with that value proposition in mind. It was more like, it's obvious that you do this. But that's when it stops. So I wish, if I go back, and it was actually your question which you didn't answer, so thanks for asking it. Is really coming more with that value prop from the get-go. So why would you do this beyond the strategic investment? So that's what I would do differently, and then we could have probably get the platform launched not 10 months ago, but maybe 18 months ago. So that's one. The other question was also around learning. Can you repeat? Sorry.
Anything that kind of took you by surprise 10 months after, positive or negative, that you were not expecting?
I think from a positive perspective that we got more adoption than I expected. We had certain targets that we set, and we were
quicker. We reached them quicker.
Yeah, very much quicker, and also with a larger extent. What I did not expect, I would say, that's what I wouldn't expect. In terms of learnings on that, I would say is the how do you now deal with that next adoption metric, with the engagement? Because we're still in that phase of getting the transactions, but how do you can keep them close to you? Because it's so easy. If you implement an ERP platform, you get your users. They have to use it. This, you could always resort back to Outlook or SharePoint, or if you got fancy, you set up collaboration right in your SharePoint. So we need to retain those users. And that's the learning that we're going through now. So we got the adoption, but how do we keep them? And not resorting back to the other icon on their desktop. It's the Outlook one. Yeah.
There's a question behind you. You could...
said in terms of, I call it being sticky, right? Yeah. How do you keep those in? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so keep them sticky is to, again, coming back to the expectations. So when we do those usability studies, and we get a lot of positive feedback, but you also, typically we, as a project lead, you go into, okay, what can I do better? And what's the feedback that we get from them? And then be very clear that we are working on improvements where needed, or there's some change management needed, right? And one major change for J&J working in this specific technology is that it's persona-based versus person-to-person based, which is Outlook, right? So it's persona-based. So we have a change management group, 2 people, that's basically working with the users. Say, okay, it's a different way of working, give us your feedback, but there's also a little bit that we need to force them in that new way of working. But stay close to them, especially the detractors, right? You have the net promoters, use them where you want, in town halls, etc. But those detractors, stay them very close to them and understand their needs, and then bring them on your journey with, okay, what's coming next? And really set the expectation that we are still on a journey. We're not saying this platform, it's perfect, go use it and don't complain. No, we're involving them in that journey. And keep them sticky.
Yeah, thanks. One follow-up question. You made a comment that as you went through this, it exceeded your expectations in terms of adoption.
Yeah.
What do you believe caused that?
Yeah, good question.
Technology.
The amazing technology. Probably easy to use, how to log in. It's just, and we also sometimes we do storytelling within J&J. It's like, just imagine, right? You come in the office in the morning, and maybe formerly you just open up your Outlook, you see all these emails. We're working in a global company, so 24/7 or 24/5, people are working, you get your notifications. And it's hard to see the forest through all those trees that you get in your inbox. And now in one platform, you see exactly with your suppliers what's happening. So I think that was an additional benefit that, of course, we expected, but not that much from the users that say, oh, yeah, I love to just not click on, of course, they're going to go to Outlook anyway, but that they have a large part of their challenges is now covered in that one platform.
But all kidding aside, I think that the approach that we took, which is deliver the first release, doesn't have to be 100% perfect, and being able to do it regularly on a monthly basis, where they see their requests being turned on, time after time, and creating that type of situation, I think has helped tremendously, and being able to enable it at the end of the day with a technology perspective.
Okay. Any other questions? There's one in the front row. Maria. This one here.
So we heard now that you had very good adoption rates, which is very positive, and also you mentioned a few times the MVP approach, which is also very common in the agile methodology at the moment. But how did you prepare the users before to be ready for the adoption? So how did you jointly create this change management mindset in advance so that they're ready for the adoption and they're ready with receiving imperfect tool in the beginning?
Yeah, so again, coming back to setting the expectation, but also just keeping that user base, because we assigned super users and then even a level below that within each business unit upfront before we launched. So we had them almost pumped up for getting the launch in their hands. And again, very clear that this is an MVP. It can do this, it cannot do that. And then just have those, we call them office hours, where people twice a week, they can call in. I think the simple answer is keep them very close to you.
Good marketing.
I got it.
Right.
Quick question related to the size of the implementation. You mentioned 80% of the revenue is through the platform. How many suppliers and users that represents? And the second question would be how much of that busy slide with the processes, how many processes are you able to digitalize with the platform?
Excellent. Yeah. Okay. Good. So first, yes, we cover more than 10,000 supplier locations in MedTech specifically, and so about the 80% of spend, a couple of thousand. Yeah, that's currently live in the platform. On the processes. So if you think about that first page that I got on those there's 43 actually that were shown on the slide. Many of them, I don't know if you really saw them in detail, are transactional. So if you think about placing a purchase order or receiving an ASN, a transshipping notification. So those are technologies that Marc spoke about that's more part of ERP. And, but they are part of how we collaborate with the supplier. I would say about 20 of the 40-ish were already in a digital technology, and I don't want to step on any of those programs that were funded, they move forward, mostly on the transactional side. However, as we call the program Porta, we do want to give the supplier an experience through one door, through the platform, to access those technologies. So that's what we established from day one. And then there were other processes, about 20 or so, that we are taking within the platform and solutioning there.
Thanks a lot.
One of the first things we implemented is identity management to make sure that we have single sign-on to all of the different processes.
There's a question just,
Two more.
just behind you first. Not you.
Yeah, quick question on ROI. You told about the inventory reduction.
Yeah.
Did you already deliver against those expectations, or is the multi-year plan to deliver against
Yeah, so no, we gave ourselves a little bit of a break. First to deploy the platform, deploy the capabilities that are intended to, and then also reach that supplier spend. But as of 2025, yeah, I'm on the hook for that.
In 2025 or after 2025?
At the end of, yeah, we do our inventory every quarter, but it's a year end, yeah. Yeah.
There was one here.
So,
Nice catch.
just a question for me. It's you've got 43 jobs to be done. How are you prioritizing and figuring out what is the next job to be done with your stakeholders?
Yeah, we did that before the project. We set a prioritization. So of the 20 years or so, 20 were already digitized, then the 20 that we want to attack. We went into the business units and had different focus groups. So again, what would add most value to your organization? Which one? Which is so much a pain that you do today through Outlook or SharePoint, which, yeah, maybe for a few others, but those are the main ones. And with that, with the value in mind, because that's at the end where my finance partner is looking for, we prioritized them, and we started indeed with those high value ones first, and now we're going more to the medium, and then at the end to the lower value ones.
Question behind you, Kostas.
I wonder how you deal with the platform is mainly for suppliers to do manual work. You talk about single sign-on. But quite some processes, transactional, are automated. There is EDI, there is messages sent automatically, there's invoicing channels, etc. Talking about taking the human out of the process. So on one end, I think it's good, but I struggle a bit how to separate between fully automatic, having your messages, fully automatic between the supplier and your company versus one single sign-on with a platform. How do you see that?
Okay.
Just focus me a little bit.
No, the question is more about how, if you think about the perspective, and that's also the topic for today, are automating processes, right?
Oh,
taking the human out of it, and then combined with the platform that we now implemented, where you still have a single sign-on and you collaborate within the platform, where a lot of human action is still needed. But I think it's a separation versus transactional platforms.
That's right. So I think the transactional, automation happens on the back ends and so on. So the user, what we're doing with those 20 is making sure that they get through to the right system in a very, we don't have to give them one sign-on for each one of those systems. So I think that's very important. As part of the ones that we create within the platform is making sure that there is a good balance between the elements that are really collaboration. I give you something, you give me, but also automating some of that as well, right? In terms of being able to distribute to many suppliers at the same time, right? The same task or the same information that we propagate through. So I think it's right, driving the right balance there.
Okay, we have time for one more if there is one.
All right.
You're going to let me down.
That's it.
It's time
Excellent.
for a beer,
Okay,
no?
perfect. Well, look, remains to say thank you ever so much. I knew this would be great, and it's exceeded my expectations. So really appreciate your time. Thank you very much to Laurens and Marc.
Thank you.